If you want to win in real estate in 2025, you must listen to this podcast. Today, I sit down with Julian Barceló, who has over 50 properties in experience here in Florida. Now, we talk about how we see the market going. We talk about what you should do if you're starting out in real estate as well as a real estate agent, and basically what's our next plans. So if you like what you're looking at, like, subscribe, comment, let me know if you like the podcast, if you don't as well, because I want to do better podcasts for you guys. So let's do it. Estamos activos, estamos ready. Julian, welcome to the podcast. Investor.
Muchas gracias. Thanks for inviting me, brother.
Estamos ready. So, bro, first question that I ask everyone on the podcast is, how many transactions have you done in real estate?
Okay, so I actually checked on this a few days ago because I was actually curious. 53 transactions.
53?
53 transactions, including some rentals. And that's been in about 2.5 years.
2.5 years?
Yeah.
So you started out two and a half years ago?
Yeah, so I actually got licensed in October of 2021, but I actually didn't start full-time working and dedicating my life to this. So I remember it was January 2nd, 2022. It was the day after New Year's, and I went into my office, and I sat down and I said, what is this next year going to look like? So I kind of put out like a little roadmap as to what I kind of wanted to work on, what I wanted to develop. I knew that social media, just for my age, at that point I was 23 years old, was going to be a huge part of my business. And it was kind of like a prep for where I'm at now, because obviously when everybody wants to get in the business, they think they're going to sell 15, 20, $25 million homes, and it does not work like that. Unless you're very well connected, at the end of the day, you still need a base. And that base for me was kind of realizing what I wanted to do and who I wanted to be in this business. And 2022 was not a great year, but it was kind of like that stepping stone into working.
Right.
Oh, I made full candidly. My 1099 said I made $16,000 in 2022.
In that full year?
In that full year. I did 2 sales, and a few rentals. But again, it was part of the process to learn to where I'm at now, where that was kind of like the baseline for everything moving forward in the future.
And how was that change? Like what major things do you change that went from only 2 transactions in a year to then away?
Well, real estate's funny because as you get older, you kind of get more experience as you go on. And looking at it now, I'm 25, and it's so funny looking back 2 years ago how bad things were. But it's crazy how so much things can change in 2 to 3 years. And looking forward into 10, 15 years in the future, that's what I'm most excited about. It's just, this industry is, everybody likes to say, I can do this part-time. You can't do this part-time. You have to be 24/7. You have to live, eat, and sleep this, because at the end of the day, I don't have a second job. The only thing I make is what, I sell or I transact. So it's really about dedicating and being obsessive. That's kind of what changed over the time, just becoming more obsessive and more obsessive with your craft.
I agree with you with the part-time thing, because you're competing against a lot of people, right?
100%.
And then if you're competing against someone that is working 40, 50 hours a week and you're only working 20 hours, it's like, come on, there's no way that you can compete that way.
100%. And also that is, you want to be part-time at this age. Remember, you have guys in the industry that have been doing this longer than I've been alive. And I've met people that I've transacted on. They'd be like, yeah, I've been a real estate agent for 32 years or 33 years. And I'm kind of looking over here. I'm like, I'm only 25. You know what I mean? So the fact of the matter is, before I was even born, they've been doing this. You can't take this part-time. Of course, everybody's situation is different. But if you actually want to be successful in this industry, you have to give it 150%.
Exactly. By the way, if you are a real estate agent, I can be your buyer. I'm looking for properties to fix and flip, anything that might need some work to be done, floors, kitchen, bathrooms, roof, anything. I will buy these properties, I will rehab them, and then I will sell them back on the market, so you can also get the listing after it's renovated. If this is something that you like and you actually can provide value to me and I can provide value to you, hit me up, 786-679-1408, or in my Instagram, Carlos González Investing. Estamos activos. Right now, are you specializing in a specific type of client or specific type of property?
So, my track record, sort of has been more in the mid-tier range homes, anywhere from 500 to 750, 800,000. That was mostly because of the market I was in. So when I first started off, I started in West Broward County. So it's in the West End, Pembroke Pines area. And, post-COVID, we've seen those houses don't exist anymore. So as time has kind of gone on, I've seen it increase.
Wait, sorry for interrupting you. What do you mean that they don't exist anymore?
So the $400,000 home, in 2019 was 4 bedrooms, 3.5 bathrooms in a gated community, 2,500 square feet.
Okay.
That was $400,000. Nowadays, that property costs $850,000 just because of the demand to live in South Florida. And that's another thing that I'm sure we'll talk about is the demand. It's higher than ever. It's the hottest real estate market in the world at this point. But to go back to your question, I actually moved down to Miami. I want to say at the beginning of this year to kind of more focus into that luxury space.
Okay.
You know, who doesn't want to sell $20 million homes?
Exactly.
But again, it's a process. It's something that you kind of have to work towards. And the first thing I did was set my goal is let's get down to Miami. Let's get involved in the atmosphere of there. And of course, it's a slowly but surely thing. But I'm 100% that I will get to where I want to be in that.
So that's your goal, being able to sell 20, 25, $30 million homes?
And I'll never, and if and when I get there, because you know, words are your power. Everything I say, you know, comes to life, and everybody has to think that way. So, yes, but I'll never discriminate the first-time home buyer at $400,000 or $500,000. I have many friends that I grew up with. They're like, "Hey, I want to buy a home." If in 3 or 4 years down the road, I'm not attaining those clients at $600,000-$700,000, but it's somebody I went to high school with or I played baseball with growing up, I will go in and give them the same service that I give that potential $20 million listing. You know what I mean?
Exactly. That makes sense. And then what's your plan to get there? Are you basically trying to do $500,000, then $1 million, $3 million, and go your way up?
Yes and no, because at the end of the day, real estate doesn't kind of work like that. It kind of works with who you surround yourself with and in the environment that you're in. I've seen multiple agents go from the 700, 800 range to then selling $5, $6, $7 million properties. I've seen people first listings, multi-million-dollar listings. It all depends on who you know. Right? So I don't want it to be sort of like a gradual 1, 2, 3, 4. I kind of want to jump into the deeper end. And for that, I've been associating myself with different people, you know, meeting different people in different spaces, executives, athletes, all that stuff where I can attain that market that I want to be in. And it's not a set number, so to say. It's more of like, this is the type of real estate that I want to sell. Like there's not a minimum or a maximum to it.
Okay, that makes sense. How do you think you get to those people? Like how... Let's say that someone looking at this podcast or hearing this podcast is like, dude, like, I don't know anyone that makes more than 50K, you know? How do you think you can get to those people that are multimillionaires that will get you to that level?
Here's the thing. So it's funny, as I mentioned, as I met more people with influence and more people of money, they love the person that's educated. They don't care how old you are. So I've had, you know, a high-level executive at a Fortune 500 company say, you really know your... Can I curse on here?
Yeah, of course.
You really know your shit, right? So it's one of those things where I'm like, okay, they appreciate the 25-year-old that knows their stuff more than the 55-year-old that knows their stuff. Why? Because they see the hustle, and usually that's how they were when they were young. So they want to give that kid the opportunity. Exactly. And after you get 1, 2, 3 opportunities, you're already in the game. And that's how real estate works. It's kind of like a snowball coming down a mountain. As you go further down and further down, the snowball gets bigger and bigger. And all the top agents in Miami, sort of say, that's how they started. You know what I mean? It was, oh, they got the big break on the $6 million listing. Then the next one was 11, 12, 13, and now they don't list anything under 25.
That's crazy.
10 million. And that's how it is in real estate. And that's why I'm so excited as I enjoy the process. That's why I enjoy the process, keep going, because I even see a little bit like, okay, you know, we're not getting those $300,000 clients anymore. Now we're in the 1.2s and the 1.3s, and that's what I'm most excited for, the snowball to keep going down.
And it's about not quitting as well, because, you know, there's going to be days that you don't get any clients that you want or whatever. And then it's all about just not quitting. As long as you're in the game, as long as you're playing, that's enough to, you know,
100%. And like I mentioned in this industry, I eat what I kill. I've had months where I haven't received a paycheck. I've had multiple months where I haven't received a paycheck. And then I have a month where I'm like, I can go to Turks and Caicos for the next week and I'm fine. But it's not about getting too big or too low. And it's part of that obsessive factor that I was talking about. You know, before when I would make a closing, I'd be like, oh, let's go. I'm going to invite the family to dinner. I'm going to get myself a pair of nice shoes. Now I'm like, now I have one less deal in escrow. I have to find the next one. You know what I mean? It's about being responsible with your money, especially as you're starting off, because you don't know when that next paycheck's coming. Exactly.
And I'm glad that you mentioned that, because that's something that I used to struggle with a lot. And I'm going to be honest, I still struggle with that a lot because, you know, you get months when you make like an X amount of money, then the next month you make 10% of that. Or and the next month you make zero, but then like it's very inconsistent. So how do you manage that? Do you have like a set rule of like, I'm going to set this percentage apart, or like?
I've always been very good with my money. I don't like to spend what I make. And that's an issue because to grow this business, you have to invest in yourself. Just a quick little story. My first closing, I remember I had, like I said, $16,000. I made 2 closings, so you can do the math on how much I made the first one. I went to Bal Harbour and I bought a Gucci jumpsuit and
Gucci jumpsuit, bro.
and a Louis Vuitton backpack.
No way.
Yeah. And ask me how many times I've worn that Gucci jumpsuit completely. Once ever, which was the day of where I tried it out that same day. So it's going back to, I don't need, the expensive things, you know what I mean? And it's funny because the more successful agent, for example, you see, the less, flash, the less brands they're wearing. And I respect everybody who kind of is into that side of fashion, but it's more about being smart with your money. We have overhead now. We have to pay where we live. We have to pay for our marketing. So all this stuff is, I already know going into the first of every month, I have an overhead minimum that I'm going to spend. And it's all about budgeting and kind of doing about that without not enjoying life. Because of course we're in Miami. There's a lot of great places to go for dinner, events and stuff like that. So it's really about finding a balance and really not going, overboard with it.
Exactly. And now that you mentioned that of like, buying material things, do you know who Alex Ramose is?
Yes.
So he said this, I don't know if this is like his original quote or whatever, but he says, if you want to impress someone that makes less money than you, you outspend them. But if you want to impress someone that makes more money than you, you outwork them.
100%.
And I love that, because if you think about it, like, you don't impress anyone with money unless they make less money than you. So
of course,
you really want to impress people with less money than you or with more money than you?
And again, this is no disrespect towards anybody. I've seen people in full designer jumpsuits and a car that's breaking down. So it's one of those things where, like, where are your priorities at? And I don't use that as a judgment on what are they doing. It's make sure we're not doing that. And of course, everybody's at different walks, different stages of life. But at the end of the day, I have to live below my means so that in 10, 15 years, I don't have to worry about any means.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So it's one of those things where, like, could we buy the nice Rolex? Could we buy that other watch? Could we buy, can we go on vacation for 2 weeks? We can, but we have to think, I think of my future me. You know what I mean? What's an escrow? What's going to happen? Can I not just buy that watch in the next 6 months? Why do I have to buy it now? So it's one of those things where you kind of really have to think about what you're purchasing and how it's going to really affect you.
And it's also about the delayed gratification, because, I mean, you can spend 10K today, or you can save that 10K, know how to invest it, and then you have 100K 6 months or a year from now. So when you have 100K, then you can spend the 10K.
Exactly.
But it's about having that delayed gratification, which is really, really hard.
Yeah, no, especially in Miami. And, if you're semi-successful in Miami, you walk down Brickell, like we were mentioning earlier, you see the Lamborghini, you see the Ferrari, this and that. But you have to realize, it's funny because I've worked with some of these individuals that you see in these cars, and it's not all sunshine and rainbows for them either. You know what I mean? It's one of those things where, do you care about portraying yourself or, actually working for your future? So it's one of those things where, again, I don't judge anybody in any space that they're in, but me personally, I'll live below my means for as much as I can until, we get to that point where we have no means.
Exactly. So now that you mentioned Miami, how do you see the market right now? You mentioned how a couple of years ago, houses were 50% of what they are worth right now.
Yeah.
Right?
So right when I got into the business, I remember the first open house that I ever worked for another agent. They said, get there 30 minutes before, set up, turn on the lights. I get there 30 minutes before, and there's a line of, I want to say 30 cars outside 30 minutes before the open house. So I go in, do my job, turn on the lights, and at 12 on the dot, I remember I heard the first ring. And I just saw a crowd of people. Carlos, it was like if they were giving away this house for free. This was November of 2021. So that house was listed for $615,000. Again, I was working the open house, so it's not my listing. I'm just hosting the open house in hopes of finding a buyer without an agent that I can represent. The person ended up buying that home, 615, for $710,000. They almost went over $100,000 over asking price to buy this home.
Where was it?
November of 2021.
No, where? What area? Peru, yeah.
Very standard home. That home probably now $760,000, $750,000. It's been, a gradual increase, but that COVID spike was so insane. And I got in when it was easy. It was easy to sell a house back then because the demand was so high and people were realizing, okay, we got to sell our home. So everything was flying, you know, over asking price, all this stuff. But I think the market has stabilized a bit. To current day, sort of say, the election is kind of what's looming. I've had 2 or 3 clients say, I want to wait for after the election to kind of see what happens. Overall, sales are still continuing to transact, but not at the record amount of numbers that we were seeing in 21 and 22.
Exactly,
sure.
exactly. I've done some flips, and the majority of my flips are like first-time home buyers, and a lot of friends of mine, they are flipping houses in that same market. But right now, they're complaining about how properties are a lot of days on the market. Are you seeing that, at least for the first-time home buyers?
It's funny you mention that. Before this market that we're currently in, the house that I had longest on the market was 42 days.
Okay.
It was a $940,000 house in Miramar, and it lasted 42 days on the market. And I was kind of sitting there saying, what's going on with this property? Why is it not selling? I have a $1.7 million listing in Miramar that hopefully I'm about to get a contract on that I'm waiting on. It's been over 3.5 months on the market.
So like 100 and
something days where I'm kind of sitting there. I'm like, this property, first of all, property's beautiful. It's in a very exclusive neighborhood and it's priced correctly. So now I look back at myself and say, what am I doing wrong? But it's not. It's the market. Because a lot of people are sitting on the sidelines. Interest rates, although they did dip a few weeks ago to a month ago, they're still up a little bit. And it's one of those things where you're just like, everybody's just kind of sitting on the sidelines right now. And I'm telling my buyers, I'm like, if you want to buy now. Because, you know, there's one option or another option in the election. And, you know, whichever option is going to spark up the buyer's market again.
Exactly.
So it's going to get competitive.
So there's a lot of buyers, is what you're saying. That are actually looking to transact right now.
There's buyers that are kind of sitting around to see what happens.
Okay.
That's what it is. Inventory relatively on historical ends is still low, although it's a bit higher than it was, you know, in the last 12 to 24 months. But again, if I could use one word to describe the market right now, it's a stalemate. Everybody's just kind of sitting around to see what happens. Homes are sitting on the market a little longer. Buyers are not jumping at homes like they were before because, again, I think the number one reason is the election. That's the number one reason, I believe, why we're kind of just sitting in a gray market right now.
That makes sense. And also, there's a lot of people waiting for the interest rates to come down, whatever.
So that's another thing. Interest rates will never, I don't want to say never, but I don't foresee interest rates going down to the low 3s, how they were in 2021, 2022, because that was, unless we have another, God forbid, another pandemic, that's the only reason they got that low. You know, interest rates have been floating. A good interest rate before then was floating in the 5.5 to 6.5 range, which is kind of where we're sitting at right now. That's a great interest rate. You know, back, you know, our parents and our parents' friends, they were buying homes with interest rates of 12, 13%. And that was normal to them. You know what I mean? So I always tell my buyers, I say, that's never going to happen again, at least in the span of when you want to buy. So if you're ready to buy and you can afford it, go out there and do it. Go out there and do it.
So something that we have talked a lot in this podcast is about that, you know, about people waiting for interest rates to come down. But what happens when they do? There are more buyers and then price is going up, like you mentioned.
Exactly.
So what's the point of waiting?
So that's another thing that I mentioned. I said, listen, we can wait for the interest rate to drop. You know, we had the biggest drop that we had was, I want to say about a month or so ago. And, you know, we didn't see it immediately because our trend was too short, but prices go up, like you mentioned. And then when prices go up, interest rates go down. Although that's the thing, you're still buying the home at a more expensive price. So if you want to sell in 3 years, your equity is diminished because you bought it at a higher price. Yeah, you got maybe a lower monthly payment, but you know, you're still transacting on a property 15% above what the actual price was.
Exactly.
And not only that, buyers are very uneducated, to say the word, because it's not buyers' fault. It's their representation sometimes. They don't educate them how they should do. But it's one of those things where lower interest rates, higher prices, but more buyers, like you mentioned. Now you're not getting a $20,000 deal. You have to pay $15,000 out of pocket over to close on that property. So It's kind of like a balancing beam, and that's kind of where we're at right now.
What type of properties do you think are more demanding right now? Like what type of properties, at least in Miami and South Florida, people are looking more for those houses?
You know what's funny? I've seen a lot of people leaving the Brickell area. The Brickell, downtown,
really?
Miami Beach. You know what it was? Many of them came down during COVID, and they either came down single or with a young kid, and they met somebody that came down during COVID as well, and they have a family now. Or that young kid is going to school now. You know, it's a lot different being 25, single in Brickell by myself than being 25 with 2 kids in Brickell. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things where functionality, that's where I go back to where I was not working previously, because I still have a lot of business, but in that Weston, Pembroke Pines, Davie, Southwest Ranches area, you get a lot more bang for your buck. A 2-bedroom apartment, and for example, we'll use the Paramount in Miami downtown, which is a great building. A 2-bedroom is going to run you $1.3 million. You can get a 4,500 square foot house in West Broward for that same amount of price. And you're sitting on a 1/4 acre lot with a pool and a lake and all that stuff. And plus the school systems are great over there. So I'm seeing a lot of people migrate from the city to the suburbs now.
So that's where the majority of people are going.
That's what I'm seeing at the moment, just because of, you know, the active listings that I have over there. I ask people, hey, where are you coming from? Sunny Isles, Bal Harbor, Brickell. So I see a lot of them trying to migrate over just because of the fact that they see that they can get more bang for their buck out there.
And are you working on a specific area, or you just have like clients and then whatever they're looking for?
It's funny because when I first moved to Miami, I was sitting down, you know, working on my plan, but things got so busy, thank God, that I'm still working on setting out fires, transacting this, finishing that, open house here, that I really haven't had a time to kind of like sit down, do a debrief and see where I want to go. There's great markets, obviously, but again, it takes a process to get in there. It's farming the markets, you know, the Coral Gables, Coconut Grove, Miami Beach markets that I will be attacking in the future. But it's one of those things where I'm glad I haven't had time to sit there and think about it.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So that's been great on that end, but that's definitely something that I'll be putting into practice for 25.
You mentioned on COVID that a lot of people came down from like New York and a lot of those places. Are you still, I mean, is that wave still going on right now? Has it slower? Or?
It's gotten definitely a little bit slower just because the majority of them are already here. We've actually seen a lot of international clients as well.
Like from South America?
Yeah, South America has been great. Colombia, we've seen an exodus of people exiting. You know, the Venezuelans that are able to get out, they're trying to get to South Florida. I've seen a lot of Asian countries as well. Like people are, you know, most of the time they're seeking asylum from their countries or great second home opportunities. South Florida, you know, whether it be Miami Beach, like I said, more in the suburbs, Davie, Fort Lauderdale, whatever the case may be. But yeah, we've had a lot of domestic still. More California than New York. New York kind of came in one big wave.
Oh, really?
But you know, California is a whole nother topic of discussion. They have a lot of taxes and the ULA and all that stuff, a lot of restrictions on their sellers, and they just kind of want to get out. So we've seen a little bit more California than New York, but the big wave, I believe, is already gone. That was the big wave that we had.
Oh, wow. But so I guess, I mean, you tell me what do you think or what you have been seeing, but I think that the majority of people are going over here because of taxes, maybe affordability is different than in New York, California, things like that.
Yeah, so it's been, the number one question is usually I can actually see where my money's going here. You know, they're not paying blindly a 47% or 50% state income tax. Many are looking for a more freeing government to kind of allow for their less business restrictions. Of course, the tax benefit's always going to be the number one reason people are going to move to South Florida. And that's what makes South Florida so attractive. The weather, of course. I don't compare it to Southern California because in my opinion, Southern California has the best weather. But the fact of the matter is you don't have cold here. You know, you're always 10, 15 minutes from the beach, no matter pretty much where you are. And the true businessman comes down here for tax benefits. Always have and always will, in my opinion.
That makes sense. What about investment properties? Have you worked with investors? You also mentioned before on the podcast that you have been working in commercial properties as well. So yeah. What can you share about that?
So in terms of investors, you know, in terms of single family homes, apartments, the margins right now are a little tight. The margins are tight for investors in the fact of prices are up, right? So rents have gone up relatively, but are not going at the same pace of the prices. I'm talking about single family residential homes, whether it be apartments, houses, whatever. We'll get into commercial in a second. Insurances are through the roof, man. So that's another thing. Taxes
for single family or for commercial? Or for both?
No, this is for single family. Okay. I'm talking about right now. So insurances are through the roof, and insurance, and then the HOAs and these condos, man. they're getting insane.
They're crazy, right?
So the margins, I was actually just doing it now. I have a cash buyer, in the 800,000-ish range. We're looking for I was running numbers, and because they asked me about Brickell. So I said, you know what, I'm going to do the numbers for you. They're seeing about 2.8 to 3% return on their investment.
Wow.
When they can allocate that money into a duplex, that's giving them 5.4 on their return, right? And you have lower taxes, lower insurance, all this stuff. What really kills, for example, I did it on at the SLS Lux. I ran numbers on one of the properties. HOA is $1,400 a month. Taxes, you're in the sky at $16,000 a year. This is roughly, again, don't quote me on this, but it's one of those things where, yeah, you have the Brickell apartment for investment, but at the end of the day, your money's not working for you.
Exactly.
I can find a high yield savings account that gives me more return than that apartment, and I don't have to put $800,000 of my cash into it.
Exactly. And I mean, not only that, but HOAs, they don't go down.
No,
they just keep.
They're only going up, and that's one of the things that to the building that we had in Surfside, that was really opened the can of worms to regulate these buildings, because a lot of them, that's where we saw the biggest spike in HOAs is they have to go through these inspections. They have to go through all these formalities to make sure that the buildings are structurally set and the way they were built, especially the older buildings where we see a lot in like Miami Beach, Bal Harbor, more up the coast of the water. Those are like older buildings. Those HOAs are in the sky, man. And it's tough. It's tough for people to purchase those properties.
Yeah. And for those that don't know what happened in Surfside, can you explain that?
Yeah. So there was a building. Don't quote me on this. I think it was 2019. If we can double check that, 2019, there was a building in Surfside, which is around Sunny Isles, Bal Harbor area. That building actually collapsed. So they actually went through an investigation. They were going through, they were going through an inspection. And they saw there were some faulty areas around the parking lot, because the pool was above the parking lot, if I'm not mistaken. Again, don't quote me on that. And there were some faulty areas that they had to re-inspect. And before they could re-inspect, the building literally collapsed. It was at 2 a.m, building collapsed, a lot of fatalities, a lot of injuries, and that really opened up the can of worms within the insurance business to assure that these buildings are actually, structurally correct. Because there's a lot of regulations for new construction buildings because of that reason that they won't have that issue. But a lot of these buildings built in the 60s, 70s, 80s, they're not the same regulations that you have in the 2020s. You know what I mean? So that was actually quite unfortunate, but that's one of the reasons why insurances are so high, and it's driving up these HOAs.
Exactly. Wow, that's a crazy situation that happened over there. Hey, make your money work for you. If you want to invest in real estate with us, you can. Hit me up, 786-679-1408, or my Instagram, Carlos González Investing. We are buying properties, rehab, and then sell them back on the market. Now, we have done over 20 properties, so if you're interested in this and you want to invest money with us, let me know. So back to the investment side. What about commercial properties? What are you seeing that buyers are looking for, and what are buyers expecting over here in South Florida?
So again, on the commercial side, I'm not as deep into when I say commercial, it's mostly multifamily that I work with. I'm not as deep as I've really specialized in residential. That's another part of my business that I would love to grow, and I'm in the process of growing. But we're still seeing that's more of a stalemate. That's been at a stalemate longer than the residential side, because it's one of those things where you want to get a good cap return, but then the sellers are looking at, well, I bought this property for $300,000. The market allows me to sell it for $1 million, but it's not the market because your numbers are off. So I always say multifamily is a lot more math. If the numbers check out, then we can go. Residential, it sounds messed up, but I can play with your heartstrings on a property to make you want to buy it. There's no playing with heartstrings in multifamily.
Exactly.
If that's not the number I'm looking for, if that's not the net income that I'm looking for, if the expenses are too high, if the rents are too low, that's not what I'm looking for. On to the next.
Exactly. But you know what? I mean, it's two different type of games, right?
100%.
But I mean, I invest, I do fix and flips, and I don't buy properties that I like. I buy properties that make sense.
Well, the smartest investor, I have one investor who doesn't even see his properties.
Exactly.
He said, what do the numbers say? What is the rentability? And he does single family, and he does well. He's building his portfolio in that. He goes, we're actually under contract right now, and he's out of town. He's not going to see the property probably ever, because I'm probably going to have it rented out for him before he even gets back.
Exactly.
So it's one of those things where real estate is the best market to park your money in long term. Best market to park your money in long term, because you're not going to get rich quick. Again, I say that, but the people that bought in 2019 and sold in 2022, that was a get rich quick. Again, at what cost of a national disaster and a national tragedy in the world? So
it's not common, and it shouldn't be expected to,
Exactly. And I'm not banking on, hey, in 3 years, your property is going to go up 125%. That's not, realistically, that's not going to happen.
Exactly.
But it's the best get rich slow scheme of all time. And it's been proven. Look at all these billionaires and stuff. How much property do they own? That's their go-to. Everybody makes money and parks it in real estate. Whether they started in real estate or not, it always ends in real estate. 99.9% of the time.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, taxes, appreciation, there's a lot of benefits to invest in real estate no matter what. So what about challenges? What challenges do you think is happening? I mean, let me ask you this question in two ways. What challenges do you think realtors are confronting right now?
So with this new lawsuit that we had with the NAR, I find it as a blessing. So just a quick rundown. This lawsuit is the sellers were discriminating against the NAR because if they were offering less commission, then agents were not coming to show their house, right? So the NAR, what they did, which is the National Association of Realtors, they passed on the MLS, which is where we see our properties. We're not allowed to disclose the commission anymore. So before on the MLS, when I would look at properties for my buyers, at the bottom it would say the listing agent's name, their brokerage, and at the bottom it says buyer's agent's commission. Something along the lines. Okay. Transaction broker commission. So it would say 2.5%, 3%, right? So what the sellers were saying is, if I'm not offering 3%, I'm having less people come into my house.
Exactly.
And my house is not selling. So with that lawsuit, that number is gone now. So I'm actually working with 3 buyers right now. And if you see my phone, it's, hi, how are you? It's Julian Barceló with Coldwell Banker, the Barceló Group. I see your property still available. Is your property still available? And they'll answer yes, no, whatever the case is. How much is the seller offering the buyer for compensation? That's my next question. Because one of two ways. Either one, I'm working with a first-time home buyer right now that can't afford me to pay me out of pocket. So he literally said, Julian, please, show me something that you would be okay with the commission with. I said, no issues. And again, this is a friend of mine, so I'm not going to sit here and say, I'm not going to show you anything that's not 3%. Although that's usually what I work with on my sales side. Or two, here's the other option, where let's say you're selling your house. I call your realtor and I say, hey, how much is Carlos offering? Carlos is offering 1.5%. So now I have to go to my buyer. I personally,
So like 1.5, like total?
No, 1.5 to me.
Oh, to you, okay.
So Carlos is offering 1.5 to the buyer. Okay. So now I have to go to my buyer and say, listen, they're offering 1.5%. My standard fee is 3%. Can you come out of pocket and pay me 1.5% at closing? They're going to say yes or no. I am glad that I haven't had to have that conversation yet because, again, every buyer is different. If this is a person buying a $3 million property, I'm sure that we can come to terms. But my buddy right now that's buying a house in the $500,000 range, I don't know if he can come out of pocket $8,000 to finish my commission. So that's why he told me from the jump, please only show me what you would be comfortable in receiving. And again, I'm a lot more lenient with him because at the end of the day, I'll take a pay. I always say 1% is better than 0. Although I would not love to work for 1% because I actually go above and beyond in my business and I go the extra mile for my clients. I'm not worth that 1%. But if you're telling me for you to secure your dream home, I'm only going to receive 2%, so be it. On to the next. You know what I mean? So that's the biggest challenge is a lot of people, especially in this industry, work a lot with buyers at the beginning. But now that we have this situation kind of unfolding, a lot of people are going to not know how to they're not going to know how to control the narrative with their buyers and saying, hey, they don't know how to have those tough conversations. Exactly. So those people that did maybe 3, 4, 5 years of deals a year, now they're doing 1 or 2. Now they can't live off those 1 or 2 deals a year. So I'm actually what I'm expecting, and I've had these conversations with a lot of agents, top agents in the industry down here, is there's going to be a lot of agents that are just going to leave the industry because there's no more business for them. Exactly. There's no more business for them.
Is it possible that the seller says that he will not pay anything?
Yes. So I actually had this conversation. I said, what if I just offer, so I had this conversation. I said, what if we just offer I was on the pitch to sell the home. I said, what if we just offer you 3% and them 0? I said, here's what's going to happen, Mr. X. Mr. X, this is what's going to happen. The buyer's agent's going to call me and I'm going to say, my seller's not offering commission, 0%. what do you think that person's going to do? Do you still think they're going to come knock on your door and they want to see your house?
There's no way.
No way. So even now with this is incentivizing these sellers to pay the full commission now. Because again, if you call me, if you're looking for a house and you're telling me, hey, I really don't have money to finish, the commission, and I call agent A and they say I'm offering 1% and agent B I'm offering 3%, I'm going to show you both houses. But now you as a buyer have that decision to say, is this house really worth the extra $15,000 that I'm going to have to pay my agent?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So this is incentivizing sellers more than ever to pay that full commission.
Interesting. And is that happening with every type of property? I mean, sorry if this question might sound stupid.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Like, does that happen with like single family homes, commercial, or
so everything? I haven't yet to find one person that is not offering any type of commission.
Okay.
The commercial deal that, we're doing, they're offering commission. I'm offering commission on all my listings. I have the house in Miramar that I told you, 1.7, I'm offering 2.5% commission, which again, 2.5% of 1.7, that's a lot better than if I offer you 1.5%, right?
Exactly.
So that's the standard commission is usually between that 2.5 to 3. I've been seeing a lot more 2.5s in the last year or so, but when I first got in, I remember it was 3% all the time.
Awesome. What about social media? You mentioned earlier how you've been working, your social media page. Is that how you're getting your clients?
So social media is more about branding. So I see social media as a long-term play. I want to say at the beginning of this year, I started taking, believe it or not, TikTok very seriously. These videos that my most popular videos are the day of life. People love to see what goes on. Yeah, dude. I mean, I get like just the one I posted 2 days ago. Again, I have 900 followers, so it's not like I have on a huge scale. But they're getting, but they're getting 7,000, 8,000, 12,000 views. Hundreds of likes. Where I'm sitting there, I'm like, people really are interested to see what kind of goes on behind the scenes. Because that's another thing with a real estate agent. Every real estate agent I'm sure you see is posts, just sold this, just sold that. Wouldn't people like to know how you got to the point of just selling that?
Exactly.
Or just listing this? And that's what I always, if I was 16, 17 years old, I would have loved to see, what is that agent doing on his daily basis that makes him, that I get to see his Instagram post 2 weeks later saying he sold a $10 million house.
Exactly.
Right? So that's one of those things. And believe it or not, I've had a lot of people reach out and say, how do I get my license? How do I get started? Can I get a job? So it's one of those things. I always answer my DMs. I say, listen, whatever state you're in, go find your local real estate license. You have any questions, you can contact me.
Nice.
And out of the 50 people or 100 people that have texted me, I have like 2 or 3 that always are like, hey, question this and that. So again, I wish I had that. So that's why every time I don't look at like the requests and the DMs much, but every time I stumble upon a message from somebody I don't follow, I always try to help them in any sort of way.
Nice. Awesome. What type of questions people are asking you? Do you think it's like
the number one question is, I want to get into real estate. What do I do? So that question is there's not one answer to it. It's the first thing you got to do is get licensed, right? So if you're in the state of Florida, I used Gold Coast Schools, for example. They do you the whole pre-licensing exam, the course, and the exam, I believe it's 40 hours, 60 hours. Don't quote me on that.
63, I think.
Yeah, 63 hours. I don't remember. I took it Monday to Sunday from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. I remember. It was like I put myself through hell to get through that thing. And then you have to take a course exam at the end of that week. If you pass that pre-course exam, then you get qualified to take the state exam. So the state exam is obviously a much difficult test in terms of the course exam. It's a lot more in depth. It's a lot more in depth for what you learn. But again, from stuff from the state exam, I really haven't utilized in my day-to-day life. And that's usually the case, but it's a good building block to your business.
Exactly.
So once you pass the state exam, you get licensed. Once you get licensed, then you have to hang your license somewhere. That's when you go and interview with brokerages, with the big ones, the small ones, the boutique, whatever the case may be. But every real estate agent has to have their license hung under a company or a brokerage.
Exactly. Once you pass your test, you are with a broker. What's the next step? How do you get clients?
So that'll depends on where it was. So I know a lot of there are some brokerages that have these boot camp style trainings for new agents. And again, that all depends on how much are you willing to do to grow your business. So if you tell me, hey, I just got my license, what do? I said, how dedicated are you to this? Because when I first got my license, I remember I drove down Hibiscus and Palm Island, which is right here in Miami Beach next to Star Island. And I was saying, man, I can't wait to sell all these homes. This is going to be awesome. But it's not, because you have to have a track record. You have to know people. You have to. So it's such a broad question. I said, what do I do? It's one of those things, okay, where do you want to dedicate your market to? Where do you want to grow towards? What type of homes do you want to sell? And you kind of have to reverse prospect how you're going to get there.
Exactly.
It's one of those things.
Are you currently investing in marketing? Like, how do you get your leads right now?
Okay, so marketing to me is the number one way for me. So I'm a people person. I don't cold call. I do cold call, but I kind of do more direct cold call. So again, I have my email systems through my CRMs of every client, all the database and stuff, and I send out weekly email blasts. I'll send out a market report. I'll send out when I have open houses, my new listings just closed. And I've compiled over the last 3 or so years, I've compiled, over 10,000 actual contacts that I've met and talked to myself.
Oh, wow.
So they know from me, open houses, door knocking, whatever the case may be.
Easy.
The first thing I ask them is, what's your email address?
Exactly.
With an email address and a name, I can figure out the rest, right? So then I put them in my database, and with these contacts, I send out my email blast. I have them subcategorized from neighborhoods to I met them at the open house, or I met this person out on the street. Everybody's in a little category. So then from there, I'll kind of, send out a newsletter once a month. The market updates is what they really love. So I'll grab a zip code, and then all the little neighborhoods that I have in that zip code, I'll send out my monthly market report. And at the bottom, I say, how much is my home worth? That little click of a button, I get to see the list of 50 to 60 to 70 people every single time that they want to click that link. And I know, this one's new. Because I organized it through my spreadsheet. I said, this one's never contacted, this one's never clicked on the button. So what will I do? I'll literally go in one by one. 10,000 contacts, let's say 1% open it. That's, what is it, 100?
Yeah. 100, yeah.
Yeah, let's say 100 people. I suck at math, but let's say 100 people open it. So I'll go in one by one. I said, okay, this person lives here. I'll check county records. Okay, this is a 6-bedroom home with 5.5 bedrooms on a 3,700 square foot. Boom. So I'll go in there and I'll literally roll one by one within a 2-mile radius, depending on where it is, and I'll send them a personalized CMA. I said, hey, this is Julian Barceló from the Barceló Group. I saw you clicked on my email. Here's a personalized CMA of your property. If you have any questions, blah, 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 let me know. Boom. I'll send that out to them. The next day, I'll call them.
Nice.
Hey, Carlos, how are you? Julian Barceló. Oh, hey, Julian, how are you? Yeah, I'm just letting you know I left that CMA in your inbox. If you have any questions at all, you let me know. I don't put pressure on them. I do not put pressure on them. I said, you got any questions? Let me know. Now, guess what? They saw my email where they had my face. They got that was the email blast. Now they got the individual email from my personal email.
Exactly.
And now they got a phone call from me. That's 3 different points of contacts within, I like to say, a week.
Nice.
But I don't cold call, crazy. This is kind of like a hot cold call.
Exactly.
Because they clicked on the button saying, how much is my home worth? You're curious. Now, see if that number made sense or not, whatever the case may be. But now you heard my voice again.
They are more motivated
100%
to sell, right?
100%. More than the person that opened my email and said, unsubscribe. Which happens. And that's fine.
It's a numbers game.
100, you got to, exactly, 100%. It's a numbers game. You got to dedicate your time to the people that are serious. And that's another thing about this lawsuit. All buyers have to sign a buyer's agreement with the buyer's agent now. So every buyer I have, they have to sign an agreement saying, I'm going to work with Julian and only with Julian for X amount of time. That snuffs out a lot of buyers that aren't serious. Because if you want to buy a pair of shoes, for example, and before you walk into Nike, they say, I need you to sign this saying you're going to buy a pair of shoes. If you actually are going to buy the pair of shoes, you're like, all right, I'll sign it. Exactly. And if you're not, you'd be like, I just kind of want to look around. You're like, all right, bye. Turn around. Go to the next store. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things where, again, a lot of people are going to be left out of the industry, but I think it makes it for the better for the people that are in the industry.
Exactly. Like for the people that actually want to work, for the people that actually want to sell their house, it's going to make the process easier.
100%.
Because it's like a filter.
100%. And I love that about that. And with my listing now, for example, I usually do this on my higher end listings. Again, it's $1.7 million. There's people out there that sell multiple millions, but this is one of the most expensive homes in the area of where I'm selling. So before you even want to address a showing, I said, send me your proof of funds, your pre-approval. I'm not going to allow you to come into this home if you're only approved for $1.2 or $1.3 million because my seller won't accept that. I'd rather have two serious showings than 10 showings that we don't know what happened. That's what the open houses are for. You want to come browse, come to the open house.
Exactly.
But for the showings, I say pre-approval. Now, that's obviously almost a $2 million house. If it's a $600,000 house, I'm not going to ask you for pre-approval because, you know, it's a lot different. It's more attainable to buy a $600,000 house than a $2 million house.
Mm-hmm. And if a buyer has a problem with that, then that's probably like a red flag. I mean, like, why?
If you don't want to send me your pre-approval, then you're not a serious buyer. It's one of those things where, you know, time is money, like everybody says. And I never really understood that phrase until I got busy. Mm-hmm. So like, if you see my calendar, everything is to the T, like spread out. Like, look at my day. This is here. Like, everything is spread out to the T right there. Right? It's packed, the whole thing. So it's one of those things where I'm like, you know, if it's within the time, like, only dedicate your time to what's actually valuable for you, your business, and your life. Mm-hmm. That's about where I stand.
100%. I agree with that. So, yeah, I mean, I think the podcast is coming to an end right now. So how can people contact you if they want your services?
Perfect. I mean, you guys can follow me on socials, Julian Barceló, but the L's a 1. On Instagram, on TikTok, I'll leave my contact information. You can drop it in the link as well. But other than that, man, you know, if you guys have any questions, you guys can follow me on socials. Reach out to me. I will get to you. No problem with that.
Awesome. Thanks for being here, man. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate the invite, brother.